Okay, it is now 1 o'clock. Good afternoon to you all. Um, we're here for our plagiarism part two information session. My name is Willie Hardy, Director of Student Support Services. We also have Ms. Donna Porch from staff. She's the Retention Data Specialist. Our other staff member is out sick. And we just want to thank you all for showing up today and then showing up early. That's even better. So we're going to get started on time and hopefully so we can end on time. Um, Today won't be one of those days I just bore you with me talking. I have two video clips that address the plagiarism. I thought they were, were helpful, and I think that you will get something out of it. Also, there was a resource or resources attached with it I think will be helpful to you all, which is the plagiarism checker, which is what your instructors use when you submit your assignments. So that way you will have the same type of tool that your instructor uses to check your assignments for plagiarism. That is already in your inbox. I sent it about 30 minutes ago. Okay. All right. So I have a video. I'm going to see if I can share it and in a way that you can hear it. So let's see what happens. Hold on a second. Let, let me know if something happens and you can't hear it. Okay.
Okay, what's up, smart students? Welcome to today's video. Actually, welcome to this series, shall I say, where we're talking all about paraphrasing. Previous video, we learned the 6 different types of plagiarism. Now what I need to do is tell you guys the most common mistakes people make, intentionally or not, when it comes to plagiarizing. And then I'm gonna give you my 3, 4, I don't remember how many, but I have a number of surefire tips and tricks, strategies that are gonna help you avoid plagiarism every single time. Let's see if I can slide out of here a little better. Let's go. All right, so let's start with the mistakes. Mistake number 1 is probably the most common, and that is not paraphrasing correctly, but including an in-text citation and considering yourself safe. So here's the thing, if you don't paraphrase correctly, even if you include a citation, it's going to be considered plagiarized material. Now, mistake number 2, you understand mistake number 1, and you're trying to paraphrase correctly. A mistake you might make here is only reading the immediate passage and then trying to paraphrase that topic. So for example, let's say you're trying to talk about what a customer relationship management system is, a CRM system is. And so you just read the definitional paragraph about it, and then you go try and talk about what it is in your paper. Guess what? You're gonna have a really hard time writing a paraphrase passage about what a CRM is. It's kind of important that you understand who it's for, how it's used, what it's made up of. So don't be afraid to read around just the portion that you're trying to paraphrase. Go ahead and increase your understanding of the topic, because that's going to ensure that you paraphrase correctly. But now, mistake number 3. Let's say you don't have time to read extra material and you kind of just need to get the material down on your paper right now. Here's a mistake that a lot of students make, and that is using a thesaurus to intentionally change a few of the words.
Fortunately, my writing process has been made so much more efficient thanks to Grammarly, but it's not a tool.
And then considering themselves safe. So I actually recommend using a thesaurus when you're paraphrasing, but you still need to change the wording of the entire sentence. You can't just change a couple words in that sentence and then try and pass it off as your own idea, because quite frankly, you're still just using that source's material. Now it's just a little bit different. So that is still going to be considered plagiarism. But now, the final common mistake that students make when it comes to plagiarism is changing the original meaning of the source. So I don't mean changing the entire thing generally, but you tweak it a little bit. So for example, you read an article, it is almost a slam dunk for what you need in your paper. So say you fib the results a little bit, or you fib the, I don't know, the demographics they're talking about. Whatever the case may be, you change it just a little bit so that it better fits your paper or better suits your needs. Again, this is a mistake because in order to use that original source's ideas, thoughts in your paper, you can't change what they wrote about in theirs. You do need to paraphrase it, but you can't change the meaning, if that makes sense. But now let's go ahead and talk about those actionable things you can do to avoid plagiarism. Starting with the first one, and that is paraphrasing or directly quoting correctly. Now here's the thing, I didn't start with this because I'm sure if you're watching this video, you already kind of know that you need to paraphrase. So it's kind of common knowledge, but it's worth reiterating here because it's important that you understand that you have to do that correctly. That is the #1 safe way that you'll avoid plagiarism. And I already kind of touched on this in the mistakes, but it's worth mentioning here. In order to paraphrase correctly, to avoid plagiarism, one of the best things you can do is to always improve your understanding of what you're trying to paraphrase. I say this time and time again, but if you feel like you're struggling, you know that feeling of, I kind of understand what I'm supposed to say, I'm trying to paraphrase it on paper, but it's just not working. It's because you don't understand the topic you're trying to paraphrase. Think about something you know a lot about. How easy is it for you to talk about versus something you don't know anything about? It's really hard for your brain to formalize words, and so researching is no different. Effective research is about improving your understanding because that's how you're going to translate it from your mind down onto that piece of paper. But let's go ahead and move on to the next tip, which is to keep track of your sources. This is going to depend on how advanced you are on paraphrasing or even how complex your assignment is. So a lot of times if you're doing a lot of research and you're reading through tons and tons of articles and sources, sometimes it's best to go ahead and keep researching, keep reading, but keep track of your sources so that way when you are writing your paper later, you know exactly what came from where. Because if you cite the wrong source in the wrong place, it doesn't matter. It's still plagiarism. And as I've said before, intentional or unintentional, the punishment is still the same. So keep track of your sources, cover your bases, that's key. Now, the next tip I'd like to offer you is actually from my own personal toolbox. I like to call it cite as you write. And so basically what this is as you're researching, you're writing your paper simultaneously. And this is what I did for every single paper. So you have a list of objectives you're trying to fulfill. I would focus on the first one. I would research, I would write it, I would cite it. And then I'd move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And so this is something that I will say if you're not used to doing, let's say you research your paper in its entirety and then you go back and write, it may take a little bit of transitional period to cite as you write, but this is something that I try and teach students because I find it's very effective. If I write a piece of paraphrase material, I put that citation immediately in my paper, the reference list entry included, because that's going to save me time later on. By the way, let me know if you'd be interested in a video on that. Simply how I used to research and write a paper. A lot of people, we all use different methods, and so sometimes it helps to see how someone else does it to realize that your system maybe could be a little more efficient. And so let me know if you want to see that. Anyways, moving on to the last strategy you can use to avoid plagiarism, and that is to use a plagiarism checker. So there are softwares, systems online that you can quite literally run your papers through to see how high your paper scores on the plagiarism scale. Spoiler, but your professor is going to do the same thing later when they grade you. Because quite frankly, when they do mark you off for plagiarism, they're not trying to be hard on you. It's that they generally run your papers through that plagiarism checker, and if it scores too high, they have to count you off. There's really nothing they can do. And so as a rule of thumb, I always say you want to keep your plagiarism score in the single digits. So in other words, when you get to 10 and higher, you want to start fixing some problems. You want to go back and see what you did incorrectly. Underneath that is fine, because quite frankly, there's always going to be a little form of plagiarism in all papers, or at least a plagiarism checker is going to find some. So keep in mind that it's okay in the single digits. Double digits, you need to fix some stuff. And here we are. If I could summarize this entire video in one sentence or a phrase, it would be this. Guys, use a plagiarism checker. When you're getting used to paraphrasing, use a plagiarism checker. It will help you. But anyways, thanks so much for watching this video all the way through. And by the way, YouTube has this awesome new feature called YouTube Thanks, which allows you guys to support your creators. Let them know what videos you like, which ones you're learning the most from, what type of videos you want more from, whatever the case may be.
Okay,
What's up, guys?
hold on,
Welcome
please.
to Smart Student. My name is Chelsea.
Let's see, can I get to the next
Today,
video?
we're gonna
Okay, so this was going right from the previous one, which kind of showed the different forms of plagiarism. And this is kind of going into, it's going to talk about some paraphrasing and how to avoid some other ways, but it's also going to repeat some stuff too. How to avoid plagiarizing. So it's short though, so here we go.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Smart Student. My name is Chelsea Seaburn, where today we're going to talk about paraphrasing. Finally, this is video 3 out of 4, where in the first 2 we talked about everything that had to do with plagiarism. So at this point, we know that plagiarism is essentially stealing in the academic world. It's using someone else's thoughts, ideas, you name it, and trying to pass it off in your own research papers, writing. And so we want to avoid that. And one of the biggest ways to do that is through paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is using that other person's ideas, but you're rewording them using new language. So you're taking their idea and you're making it yours. You still have to credit that original author, but now you're safe to use it in your papers. And quite frankly, academic writing is made up of a lot of paraphrased material, which is why it's important we learn how to do this correctly. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into the exact steps that you need to take in order to paraphrase correctly. And quite frankly, I want to level with you guys, because when it comes to learning how to paraphrase, it's an art and it's difficult to learn. And when I've researched and I've looked online and seeing how other people teach you guys to paraphrase, it's essentially the same reiterated steps over and over that sound good on paper, but they're really hard to apply because they're not practical. At least they're not taught practically. So I'm going to give you guys my unfiltered steps on how to paraphrase. We're going to look at it through the lens of how I paraphrased when I was in school. And mind you, depending on where you're at in the spectrum of paraphrasing, whether you're beginner or you're advanced, you may not take all of the steps. So I'm going to do my best to explain each one, and then you'll need to use your discretion on where you fall. All right, let's get started with step number 1. Set your intention. This isn't something I see taught very often that I really wish was. So how many of you can relate to when you're researching for a paper, a lot of times you don't know what you're looking for. So you're kind of just researching blindly, hoping something is going to pop out at you. And when that something does pop out at you, then you start figuring out how to paraphrase. That's what you want to use in your paper. I don't like teaching students to do it this way. Instead, I highly recommend setting a goal for your research. So when you're writing a paper and you're focusing on a section, you're generally trying to fulfill an objective. What objective are you trying to fulfill, and what is your goal about it? Because once you understand that, then you can do smart research. You can go find credible sources easier, and you know what you're looking for. So it's a lot easier to paraphrase. So step number 1, always set your intention when you're researching, because this is going to trickle down into how effective you are at paraphrasing. Now, step number 2, read until you grasp the meaning. So step number 1, you set your intention, you found a source, it's credible. Now you're reading to find material that you'd like to use in your paper to back up that objective, okay? So when you're reading it, make sure you read until you fully understand. Grasp its meaning is the most important part of this step, and it's a bit hazy for a lot of students. Again, let me know if you can relate to this, but you find a section you'd like to paraphrase because it meets the quota in your paper. How many of you just read that section? So you end up trying to paraphrase, say, 1 paragraph or 3 sentences. This makes it very difficult, because what I recommend doing is read around that passage. A lot of times the information on the outskirts of that one idea you're trying to paraphrase can help you understand the meaning.
One of the things that I struggle with as a working professional is email anxiety. So what's been life-changing for me is using Grammarly for work.
And the better you understand something, the easier it is going to be for you to paraphrase. Because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you're trying to paraphrase something and it's just not coming out, it's because you don't understand what you're trying to paraphrase. So pro tip number 2 with this step is, if you are trying to paraphrase and you're having those roadblocks, go read more information. Go find another source to tell you about this topic you're trying to research, because the more information you gather, the easier it's going to be for you to paraphrase. Now, just to be clear, as long as you're not reading different ideas about that topic in these other sources, you can come back to that one source now that it's clear, and you only have to cite that one. But again, if you read another source about the topic and it's completely a different angle, a different idea about it, then keep in mind you'd have to cite both of them. But for that one that you're trying to paraphrase, if you don't understand it, go read more information about it. Once you have your understanding, you can move on to step number 3, which is to identify what about this concept you're trying to paraphrase. And so this is where, depending on if you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced at paraphrasing, this step will look different for you. So a lot of times when you get better at paraphrasing, this is going to happen as a thought process. As you're reading, as you're researching and understanding, you're going to be identifying how that source meets the goal that you set in step 1. So the intention that you're trying to fulfill as you're researching and reading these sources, you're going to be thinking about how it fits in there, and you're going to be qualifying it, if you will, as a credible source to use in your paper as research. However, if you're on the beginner side, you're just getting used to writing, paraphrasing is really hard and intimidating, you might actually quite literally identify the concepts that you'd like to use in your paraphrase by, say, putting them in a separate Word document, maybe even writing them down, but putting a couple keywords and phrases somewhere, so that way when you're thinking about it, you can remember, okay, I'm trying to meet this objective with these 3 different points this article talks about it, and then you can move on to building your paraphrase. But once you've done that, you're in good shape. You can move on to the next step, which I don't remember what number we're on. So let's just say next step, go ahead and write your paraphrase. Again, depending on your level of expertise here, this is going to look different. Some people can go ahead and just type it out and get it right. On the first time, you might have to change a few things while you're doing it, but a lot of times when you're at this level, you can keep the source open and you can read it and kind of refer to it, so that way you write your paraphrased section correctly. If you're on the more beginner side, you might need to put that passage away. Put the book away, put whatever it is you're researching out of your mind, because it can be hard sometimes to have it right there and then write something differently. So this is going to depend on you, where you use your discretion. But at this point, go ahead and write down your paraphrased version. But once you're finished writing that out, you feel satisfied with it, you're gonna move on to the next step, which is to compare the two. And you may actually skip this step if you are on the more advanced side because you might have already been comparing it as you wrote your paraphrase. But basically, you just want to ensure that what you wrote is not too similar to the paraphrase material, that you did indeed reword it using your own words, and that you're not copying their material too close to verbatim. Now, I will say, if you do compare the two and you see that, okay, there's a few phrases and sentences it is a little too similar, go ahead and reword it. If you need to go read another passage somewhere else, again, to improve your understanding, go do that and then come back and reword your paraphrase section until it's paraphrased correctly. And remember, you can always use a plagiarism checker if you're unsure. So that's always great if you're new to paraphrasing and you haven't quite got down the art of how to do this, all right? And then finally, moving on to the last next step, go ahead and create your citation. It's always going to be a full reference list entry followed by the corresponding in-text citation, which for most of you, you're going to be following APA 7th edition formatting guidelines. But just remember, even if you're paraphrasing or directly quoting, especially if you're directly quoting, you need to cite the source correctly. You still have to give credit to the author because you are using their ideas. But I just want to reiterate one last time, use that plagiarism checker if you're unsure. Remember from the previous video that a good paper, you should fall somewhere below 10% on the plagiarism score. There's always going to be at least a little bit in there, but you want to make sure you're in the single digits. Anytime you start getting into those double digits, you're going to need to fix something because remember, your professor is not being hard on you. They're running your paper through a plagiarism checker as well. And so if you score in those double digits, their hands are tied. They're going to have to count you off. So go ahead and do your due diligence and check yourself. But that's it for now. I have one more video in this series, which I will see you in a few days for that. And by the way, if you enjoyed this video, you like this content, a great way to support your creators is by using YouTube Thanks, which is one of the most awesome features YouTube has ever given out. You can find it down below where you like and subscribe. And basically it allows you to
I'm sorry. That was a lot of tips on plagiarism, how to avoid it, and it's paraphrasing. Kind of went deep into that. I know myself and Mr. Taylor had a short conversation about that maybe a week ago or two. And I hope that information was helpful. Did anybody find any of that helpful?
Definitely. I think the tip that she gave, the cite as you write, I think that's very beneficial. I've written some papers before, and that's like the most frustrating thing is like, okay, now I'm done writing my paper. Wait a minute, I got to go back and cite all this stuff. And that cite as you write, I think that's like super beneficial. I'm definitely going to put that one into practice.
Good deal. All right. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. I saw it was somebody that said yes. Who was that said yes in the chat? I was trying to write too. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, Miss Eaton. Thank you. Well, good. I'm glad someone got you all got something out of it. I kind of just punched it in and she popped up. She popped up and I was like, I like it. It's short, it's direct, it's right, exactly what we're talking about. So I didn't feel I could have explained it any better. So, it worked out. So okay, Quanisha, thank you for sharing. So yeah, guys, listen, thank you all for coming. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Ms. Porch, any comments?
No.
Okay. Okay, guys. Hey, this was short and sweet. Until the next time, we thank you for coming. Hold 1 second. I think I got everyone's 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing somebody.
I have the attendance. The surveys will be sent out right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, thank you for coming. I want you to have a great, great rest of your day. And look, it only took 24 minutes. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.